I'm going to do something profoundly and disconcertingly unorthodox. You have occasionally interrupted with ripples of applause. The screen in front of me says your time has run out. Please sum up. I have 2 or 3 other things I'd like to say. Do I have your collective permission to say them? The Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria is still $500 million short this year and more than $1 billion short next year. At the moment, there is no obvious way to close the shortfall. It is almost inconceivable that the extravagant promises of Gleneagles are revealed as so fatuous that the Global Fund is now compromised. No one is asking for any more than that which was promised, but the Pavlovian betrayal of the South has already begun. Everything in the battle against AIDS is put at risk by the behavior of the G8. Yesterday, Dr. Julio Montaner courageously characterized that behavior as genocide. I remember back in 2001 in an op-ed for the Globe and Mail, I used the phrase mass murder. It's hard, in the face of the annihilating human toll, not to be driven to linguistic extremes. This issue of resources makes or breaks the response to the pandemic. It is imperative that the delegates here assembled never let the G8 countries off the hook. What has to happen, I think, is that we place a temporary moratorium on the endless self-indulgent proliferation of meetings, seminars, roundtables, discussion groups, task forces ad nauseum, plus the production of reports, documents, monographs, statistical data ad repetition, and concentrate every energy at country level. At the opening of this conference, Peter Piot talked of the next 25 years. He's right to do so. He indicated it would be a long and difficult haul. He's right again. But if the next 25 years are to take advantage of the guarded optimism of this conference, if the next 25 years are to overcome the lethargy and inertia of the last 25 years, if the next 25 years are to link inseparably poverty and disease and the Millennium Development Goals, then it has to happen in country, on the ground, organized and orchestrated by the countries themselves and the agencies on the ground, whether multilateral, bilateral, or civil society, must be held accountable. That's what's been missing. That's the job of the delegates to this conference, holding people and organizations accountable. This 16th International AIDS Conference, beyond any preceding conference, has given voice to youth. But it's still a limited and marginalized voice, reflecting the hostile ambiguity of the adult world. The figures are brutal and stark. Fully 50% of new infections between the ages of 15 and 24, and yet who can deny the appalling absence of programs for and engagement of young people in the fight against the pandemic? The situation cries out for redress, and it must be redressed well beyond smarmy tokenism. Finally, in my view, as delegates doubtless know, the most vexing and intolerable dimension of the pandemic is what is happening to women. It's the one area of HIV and AIDS which leaves me feeling most helpless and most enraged. Gender inequality is driving the pandemic, and we will never subdue the gruesome force of AIDS until the rights of women become paramount in the struggle. Last Monday morning at the Women's March, the signs read, "Women's rights are human rights." That was the slogan that captured the Vienna International Conference on Human Rights in 1993. It was the slogan repeated at the Cairo Conference on Population in 1994, and yet again at Beijing in 1995. It's never been made real, And so long as men control the levers and bastions of power, it never will be real. Whether it's the apparatus of the United Nations, including the agencies, or the endless number of high-level panels or auspicious studies of human development like the Blair Commission on Africa, the demeaning diminution of women is everywhere evident. And those examples are but proxies for the wider world, particularly the developing world, where freedom from sexual violence, the right to sexual autonomy, to sexual and reproductive health, social and economic independence, and even the whiff of gender equality are barely approximated. It's a ghastly, deadly business, this untrammeled oppression of women in so many countries on the planet. My closest colleagues and I have come to the conclusion that one of the ways to diminish the impact of the AIDS virus is by creating a powerful international agency for women, funded and staffed to the teeth. There must be voice and advocacy and operational capacity on the ground for 52% of the world's population. There is a UN reform panel at the moment contemplating the creation of a new entity, provided they have the courage to confront the warped and abysmal gender architecture of the United Nations. If they find the courage, I deeply believe that we could begin to still the carnage, and what works for AIDS can work everywhere. I challenge you, my fellow delegates, to enter the fray against gender inequality. There is no more honorable and productive calling. There is nothing of greater import in this world. All roads lead from women to social change, and that includes subduing the pandemic. For my own part, when I leave the post of envoy at the end of the year, I have asked that my successor be an African, but most important, an African woman. Thank you.